All right. Welcome in, everybody. Hope you're all having a great Tuesday. This is the Slate DraftKings show. We take you up until 6 o'clock Eastern time, just around 6 o'clock. Myself and Gary and Thorne joining you today to get into a couple of sports. There was a little NFL breaking news. Two defensive moves. Lions moving on from a corner. Devin White has requested a trade out of Tampa. If anything else, groundbreaking comes out of that, say Devin White goes to like a real contender or something, then perhaps we'll get involved. But two sports we want to focus on tonight. We've got Major League Baseball, big slate, 15 games. Everyone's in action tonight. But we're going to start with the NBA play-in tournament.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't established this yet, Gary. And is this the playoffs or is this the play-in? You follow me?
This is the play-in. The NBA has gone to great lengths to say that this is not the playoffs. This is the play-in. If you do not qualify for the playoffs through the play-in tournament, you still get a lottery pick. So I think by definition, you can't have a lottery pick and be a playoff team in the NBA. There's also been that really weird caveat the last couple of years that because this isn't the regular season and because this isn't the playoffs, where do these stats go? They sort of just get lost to time. Like, these don't go towards your career totals in any sense. They're just sort of, I don't know, gone.
It's a good point.
So, when DeMar DeRozan drops a revenge 60 points tomorrow against the Raptors, just sort of that's in our memory and nowhere else.
It's an excellent point. So it would be what's the word I'm looking for? It would sound silly to say that it's an exhibition game because that's not the case. This game,
a lot on the line, kind of more on the line in the West, I would say, than there's on the line in the East. I think feasibly you could convince yourself that a team advancing into the Western Conference playoff picture with just how flat everything seems in the West, it's worth the Lakers trying to get in. It's worth the Timberwolves trying to get in. In the East, I mean, congrats. You get a chance to get swept by Boston or Milwaukee. Congratulations, guys. But yeah, the West I think is a lot more compelling. I'll say that.
All right. We can mix in some DFS as well, but we want to break down these two games, Hawks and Heat tonight, and then Wolves Lakers, the other play-in games tomorrow, Bulls Raptors, Thunder Pelicans. Lines are up and available at the DraftKings Sportsbook, as we show you now. We'll just go right in order. We'll start with Atlanta and Miami. The winner of this game faces Boston, which would begin on Saturday, that NBA opening round series in the East. What would you, is -5 a fair line for Miami? How do you break this one down?
I think so. A lot was made that this is a rematch of a series we got last year. This is also two divisional opponents. We've seen a lot of Heat-Hawks the last couple years. And, I know the Hawks have a new coach. Obviously, they bring in DeJounte Murray. A lot of people said this offseason, like that was that move you could almost trace back very easily directly to the results of that Heat playoff series, where the Heat sort of have the special recipe for shutting down Trae Young. And this hasn't even really been the best Trae Young season, if we're being honest.
Mm-hmm.
And the Hawks needed a secondary creator on this team for when defenses like the Heat take away Trae Young. So this is a very good opportunity for the Hawks front office to kind of test the mettle of this trade, this giant trade they made in the offseason. But generally speaking, the Heat have had their way with the Hawks. I believe the number I saw out there for Southeastern opponents in general is the Heat have not lost a home game to a division rival in their last 20 matchups within the division. So it's been pretty one-sided when they get to play in Miami. There's a lot of noise in like the last couple of weeks when it comes to like looking up net rating or looking up offensive rating, et cetera, because let's be perfectly honest, the last 3 weeks of the NBA season have been an absolute circus. None of these games mattered at all. Some of the lineup constructions were absolutely ridiculous. We had teams that could still qualify for the playoffs actively tanking. So, a lot of chicanery, a lot of tomfoolery. So there's a lot of noise with this kind of stuff. But the one thing I will say with the Heat, this had been a team that had struggled to score all season long. Like, really down at the bottom of the league in terms of offensive rating. I believe they were like 25th or 26th for most of the season.
25th is where they finished. I had that pulled up. Atlanta 7th, and then the two teams flipped the script defensively. Miami's top 10, 9th in defensive rating. Atlanta 22nd.
And if you have the stats pulled up right now, you can tell everyone 25th in the NBA in offensive rating is almost last because the teams underneath the Heat were actively trying to lose. So
26th, Orlando, 27th, Houston. Yep. 28th, Detroit. San Antonio, 29th. Charlotte, 30th.
Exactly. So of the teams actually trying to win games, Miami had the worst offense in the NBA this season. However, over their last 15 games, and they won a majority of these games, they were scoring 118 points per 100 possessions. Now, again, were some of those games against teams playing their B and C squad lineups? Yes. But the fact remains, whether or not you want to call this the playoffs or not, I think to Jimmy Butler, this is now the playoffs. And we all know that Jimmy Butler can raise his game to another level when it comes to the playoffs. So I think this is a pretty fair line, -5 for the Heat. I would be enticed just to bet the Heat at that number. I would also say the over in this game is very enticing because the Heat had been a team all season long where you just played the under. They are methodical on offense when it comes to pace. And like we just said, they've struggled to score in the half court for a majority of the season. However, Atlanta is a terrible defensive team and one that across the last 15 games of the season operated at the third fastest pace in the NBA. If this is a game where even a couple of those like tertiary Heat players can just hit their wide open threes, like, Max Strus or Victor Oladipo, whoever it is, Kyle Lowry, if they can just hit a couple shots, I really do think the Heat are going to score like 115, 120 points in this game just because of the pace and the fact that Atlanta can't play defense.
So in Atlanta, to your point, third best over clip in the NBA this year, Utah, San Antonio, and then Atlanta, 12 games over 500. So I'm confused. Did you care about the last 15 games or did you not in terms of your handicapping?
So I think you just have to sort of pick and choose. I think you have to pick up on things and say, like, look, this could mean nothing. But at the same time, when the Heat over a 15-game period, a team that struggled to score as much as they did, are averaging 118 points per 100 possessions for a fifth of the season, I think that matters a little bit. Like, I think they're finding themselves. They're healthy. They really haven't been healthy all season long. But again, I think playing the over, as you pointed out with some of the season-long trends, this is mostly about the Hawks more so than the Heat. The Heat just happen to be peaking offensively at the right time.
All right, very good. So an interest in the total. So, and would you want to lay the 5, or is that just kind of just about right?
I'd rather play the over. But yeah, I think if I had to pick a line on or have to take a side on this spread, I would take the -5 with the Heat.
I would imagine that might give you some interest in player props from a points perspective. Who's going to benefit from Atlanta's bad defense, do you suppose? I mean, you've got your usual Gerard Bios, your Jimmy Butlers. I understand that, but is there someone else kind of off the board that might be like, they could possibly exploit their deficiencies?
I mean, you could look at someone maybe like a Max Strus. I think 11.5 is the number there. Like, the formula for Strus going over this number is probably he hits 2 or 3 3-pointers, which is very possible. He's a great shooter. He's been a little streakier this season than he has been in the past. But at the same time, you start to see these rotations get dwindled down in the playoffs. Like, I think you're really going to see more Jimmy Butler, more Bam Adebayo, and more Tyler Hero than we've seen at any point this season. I think we start getting to the range of like them playing 36 to 40 minutes in these games. Because I think if you're the Heat, you really do want to win this game desperately. Obviously, you have a bit of a safety net with getting to play the winner of Toronto-Chicago if you do lose this contest. But, this has been kind of a theory tossed around, I know, by a lot of Boston sports fans. And I'm sure this has been a subject of some talk radio segments in your neck of the woods, Clash.
Please.
But Heat-Celtics is kind of one of those series where you look at the Celtics and go, oh, that's a much better team. They should win. But there's something about the Heat. You're just like, I don't know, man. They seem to match up really well with the Celtics.
I don't disagree. It would give me nightmares. It would give me flashbacks to what last year was. I mean,
Yeah.
I like Joe Mazzulla, but Eric
Mhm.
Spoelstra's been doing it a long time. He makes adjustments.
Mhm.
Since the bubble, Miami's played this team pretty tough. So
I think Miami was even like one of the first Celtic losses of the season. Like, weren't they like 21?
yeah, they had a home and
4?
home, I think, like a Wednesday, Friday,
Mhm.
both in Boston and Miami. They weren't competitive in one of them, but they did beat the Celtics. They may have beat the Celtics they may have handed the Celtics their first home loss of the year, something
That
like
sounds right. Yeah.
in
I
December.
think to answer your question, Tyler Hero's at like 21 and a half. I think you can pretty comfortably take the over there. I think he's just going to play a ton of minutes. He's going to get hunted on defense a little bit. Like, he's going to have to take one of Trae Young or one of DeJounte Murray, and that's going to be a really tough matchup for Tyler Hero. But he gets hunted all the time. The Heat have kind of just accepted that at this point, and I think they'll leave him out there, and he's going to score some big points in this game.
All right, very good. And I'm looking it up really fast. Celtics, they lost to Cleveland overtime at home. That was one of their first losses.
Right.
And then Miami, that was their second one, overtime.
Okay.
Yep, December 2nd.
Right, because they didn't have a regulation home loss for an exceedingly long amount of time.
Right. And then, and then the Orlando Magic came to town and beat them twice. Can't figure that one out still. So, okay, very good. There's your Miami, Atlanta preview. The Hawks stink on defense. Miami should exploit that. And with a fully loaded group, I don't know if we're going to get 20-something out of Udonis Haslem tonight. I would not. That would be. Does he even have a lineup here? I don't think he does.
Probably not.
No.
I think that was all the gas that was left in the tank.
Yeah.
That was impressive, though. I will say, was not expecting to be like entertained that last Sunday of the season. There was some really weird stuff and entertaining stuff that happened on that day. A lot of it involving the Timberwolves, as we segue into this.
Yeah. So really quick from a narrative, like just from a pure, like your interest in the league and trying to make sense of just the Timberwolves direction. You basically do the Drew Holiday trade that Milwaukee did to get Rudy Gobert. And he throws the punch at Kyle Anderson. And now he's not playing.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. Like maybe there's team rules, which Boston had to do the team rules thing. You know what I'm getting at. Okay, I get it. There's team rules. It's a playoff game. I mean, sorry, Adam Silver. It's a play-in game to make the playoffs. The winner go home. He's not playing. Optically, that doesn't sound great. I think the Lakers are 8.5-point favorites. The public side is LA. They're always a public side. So it brings me to ask you, is that the correct? Are the Lakers are the Wolves being overlooked a little bit?
I think so. I do think that there's a non-zero chance that the team might be better without Rudy Gobert on it. And
non-zero chance they might be better.
Like, Gobert is obviously a very talented player. For what he does, he's still near elite or elite in terms of protecting the rim and rebounding. And there's obvious value to that. But you'll remember at the start of the season when the Timberwolves were trying to have he and Karl Anthony Towns coexist. This is before Towns had to miss like 50 some odd games due to injury. It was a really awkward fit. And people were saying that as soon as this trade was made. Like, I just don't understand how you're going to have these two guys coexist on the court. From a fit perspective, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Look, I think like the depth is going to hurt. The fact that they don't really have that much in terms of size behind Rudy Gobert is tough. Like, I think this is where you're going to see like an injury to Naz Reid, which I don't want to say people glossed over that when it happened a couple weeks ago, but it was like, okay, whatever. Karl Anthony Towns is back. Like, they don't really need Naz Reid that much. Now you kind of do. And I think from a DFS perspective, I am all over Anthony Davis tonight. Like, I think there is no one on this Timberwolves roster that can guard Anthony Davis. That was going to be Rudy Gobert's job. But at the same time, 8.5, 9 points, like that is a huge line for two teams that are, relatively interchangeable in terms of their like season-long statistics. I think if you think the Lakers are going to win this game, I have no problem with that. I would agree with you that the Lakers should be favored. But I would say I am pretty intrigued by just taking the points with the Timberwolves. Like, that is a huge line for two teams that finished the season with the same record.
Sure, Gobert had something to do with this, but the Wolves top 10 defensive rating last 15 games of the season, just using your 15-game barometer. And I think the Wolves and the Lakers in their situations and just the West entirely, I think looking at the the final 15 games of the season in the West, those were, especially for the Lakers, they were basically in playoff mode since the shakeup, since the roster shakeup. They had to be in win now mode because they couldn't afford the risk of possibly missing the play-in altogether. Point being is I think they turned it up a notch, and they didn't play great teams. They had a nice win against Golden State. They beat this Wolves team earlier in the year during their little surge, but mostly bad teams that they beat up on. It's because of this guy here that we got up, Anthony Davis, for playing like how they wanted him to play.
I think just got named Western Conference Player of the Month earlier today. So, again, just a fantastic stretch for Davis. And you're right, like, they've played some easy teams. And this is, again, why you kind of have to, like, really parse through some of these last 10, last 15 statistics, because if you just bring up the list of like best net rating in basketball the last 15 games, the Lakers have the 5th best net rating in the league in that span of time. That's really good. Like, it's never a bad thing to be outscoring opponents by that many points per 100 possessions over a span of time that large. However, when you look at like the 4 teams who rank ahead of the Lakers, Boston has the best net rating in basketball in that span of time. That makes sense. But like, Toronto is top 5.
Yeah.
New Orleans is top 5. Like, it just kind of takes away some of the gravitas of the Lakers being like, yeah, we were top 5 net rating the last 15 games. Cool. Like, how many of those games actually mattered? How many meant something? And that's kind of where you struggle a little bit with this. Again, I just think that these are two relatively comparable teams, even without Rudy Gobert playing. I just think Minnesota has the offensive firepower to keep this game close, even if they are having trouble stopping the Lakers defensively. Because again, I mean, I think the thing too that we talk about with Minnesota, it's also not just the fact that they are missing Rudy Gobert that might hurt their defense. Jaden McDaniels getting hurt and having to have surgery, that's a pretty massive deal. I mean, he's one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. Like, he's probably someone who is going to get a lot of like D'Angelo Russell, LeBron James assignment. So again, you're just starting to like look at this Timberwolves defense and go, who are the stoppers? Because your best 2 defenders are not available for you tonight. And that's got to be a little worrisome, but I do think they have the firepower to keep this thing close.
And the Lakers, when they beat Minnesota I think that was in the month of April, right? Earlier in April. It might have been the month of March when they faced each other. I just had the date up here and I lost it. March 31st, last day of March. Minnesota had both Gobert and Towns. Davis went for 38 and 17. 15 of 26, only took 2 threes, 8 of 10 at the line. LeBron was fine, 18 points. And that, like you said, the injury to and McDaniels was a factor in that game too. He played 37 minutes.
Yeah, huge factor. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a depleted front court, that's for sure. So we're gonna, if the Wolves are gonna hang around, they need Anthony Edwards to be better than 4 of 16 from the field, which is what he was in that game.
And I think like just regression, he's gonna probably have a better game. I think Anthony Edwards is also one of those guys who, this is more of an NBA thing than it is like in any other league thing, I think. But I think he's just one of those dudes when like the lights come on and when it's like a nationally televised game, like I'm there. Like, he's not afraid at the very least. Like, sometimes you see guys in big situations who don't want the ball. Anthony Edwards wants the ball. Maybe he's going to miss the shot, but he wants the ball.
Did you see Hustle? He shined. Well, he didn't shine in the last part of Hustle, but in the beginning parts, in the big scouting combine appearances, he was. I'm trying to remember his name. What was his name in Hustle?
I only ever remember Juancho's name.
Bo Cruz, and he was Kermit Wiltz.
It was a good name. It's a good name.
Kermit Wiltz. Okay. Anything else you like from the game? 233 is the total. What do we think of the total?
I would take the over too. Again, the Lakers, generally speaking, a very up-tempo offense, tend to be towards the top of the league in pace throughout the season, even throughout their various roster incarnations. They just play fast. And like I said, I think the Timberwolves defensively are just ravaged right now. I think this is going to be a really high-scoring game.
All righty. Wolves-Lakers, the second play-in game of the night. And anything from a player prop perspective, you mentioned Davis and DFS. 25.5 points is the point total.
You can look at that. I mean, you could take a look at like his points and rebounding prop. That's always kind of fun too. I think in general, though, like in terms of the star players, I think across the board for really both these games, I just think you're going to get a higher concentration of the good players playing in terms of high minutes. And both of these games should be pretty up-tempo. So I think I would lean towards most overs in terms of props tonight.
38.5 for his points and rebounds, Anthony Davis.
Steve. I might just take the points, actually. I think I like the points prop better than I like the
25.5 the points. And both of those lines, the points line and the points and rebounds line, are juiced to -130.
Makes sense.
Okay. Is LeBron being overlooked tonight? Possibly from a DFS standpoint. Where is LeBron on the price tag?
It's still pretty high.
Okay. Wow. Second steepest. Wow.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say so. But
contrarian, possibly.
Maybe. I could see a lot of people kind of thinking like, okay, if you're picking one star from this Lakers lineup, I'm going to go with Anthony Davis. I feel like that's probably the overwhelming thought process. So if you want to kind of zig and go with LeBron and fade Davis a little bit, that's not a terrible idea. Like, I think LeBron stepping up and having a big game tonight would not be unheard of. Or they could both just go off. I mean, as much as I think that the Heat-Hawks game is going to be higher scoring than it's maybe being given credit for, I would still say the better overall offensive environment is this Lakers-Timberwolves game. So even if you just want to really concentrate on this particular game stack on the 2-game slate, that's perfectly fine too.
Okay. The year they met, the Lakers missed the playoffs last year. They were in the play-in 2 years ago, and they played Golden State. And, they don't have... You know what? You're onto something here, because now I can't see stats from this game.
I'm pretty sure that game, the Lakers Golden State game we're talking about.
Yeah, LeBron hit that 3 at the end.
That was the one where he's like, he got poked in the eye, and he's like, I saw 3 rims, and I just aimed for the middle one. And you're like,
He drained it in Steph's face. That's right. Okay. Well, if we get anything like that, I mean, Steph and LeBron on the play-in game is pretty all-time. But you're right. I'm looking at the box score. I've got nothing here.
So. Lost of time, man. Lost of time.
Unbelievable. Fine. We'll move on. Baseball. A lot of studs in terms of arms on the mound tonight. At least notable names. Garrett Cole's on the slate. Christian Javier's on the slate. I mean, I could make a case really for any of these. Grayson Rodriguez is a promising prospect for the Baltimore Orioles. You got Nola. Can he get his act together? Shane McClanahan was in the Cy Young run last year. You got Manoah for the Blue Jays taking on a bad Tigers team. You got Ohtani tonight against the Nationals.
DeGrom, Corbin Burns. There's a lot of guys going tonight. We're still in that cool part of the season where most teams are on the same 5-day schedule. So you're going to just keep getting the opening day starters over and over and over again until it gets a little watered down in a couple weeks.
So Patrick Corbin not available today or tonight.
No.
Rich Hill tomorrow though, 12:30.
There you go.
Set your alarms for and Lucas Giolito at 1:10. Those two faced each other last week, and that was just played out beautifully how those two looked previously. But that's for tomorrow. What do you like for Dustin May's off to a good start for the Dodgers? What do we like tonight on this gigantic 15-game slate?
Yeah, so again, a couple ways to play this. You can play the 15-game variety if you want, and like you said, first pitch for that is about 15 minutes away.
Sorry, I keep forgetting that the DFS thing.
It's all good. It's all good. The main DraftKings slate does get going at 7 p.m. That's a 10-gamer. So we do lose a lot of those aces. Like Cole is in the early slate.
Yeah.
McClanahan's in the early slate. Grayson Rodriguez is in the early slate. So that's a little unfortunate.
Yep.
But there's still a lot of star power on the pitching slate for the 10-gamer. And it's interesting. I still think this is probably a product of just so many great pitchers in one slate. It kind of throws the algorithm for a little bit of a loop. But a lot of guys are just too cheap. The fact that we have this many aces on the same slate and no one is priced above 10K just doesn't make any sense. I think the first question a lot of people are going to ask themselves tonight is DeGrom or Ohtani. I'm going to lean towards Jacob DeGrom, and I think people might gravitate towards Ohtani just because everyone loves Ohtani, first and foremost. Secondly, he's a little bit cheaper, and it's nice to save some money where you can. But when you look at the matchup, and both matchups are fantastic. Let's not bury the lead here. But when you really start nitpicking these teams, the Nationals, for all their faults, swing all the time. And teams that are hyper aggressive at swinging, we saw this with the Guardians last season, they rarely work deep into counts. So they're rarely in 2-strike counts, so they rarely strike out. The Nationals actually have the second lowest strikeout rate in all of baseball. It is the lowest strikeout rate in the National League at under 18%. Ohtani's good enough where that doesn't matter that much. Like, I still think Ohtani's going to get 6 or 7 strikeouts tonight, but when you look at DeGrom, who's coming off an 11 strikeout performance in his last start, he's going up against the Royals. The Royals just yesterday were part of MLB history when Andrew Heaney struck out 9 consecutive batters. The Royals strike out all the time. They have the 3rd highest strikeout rate in baseball, up over 26%. I think DeGrom is on like double-digit strikeout watch again tonight. I mean, he's healthy. Like, when Jacob DeGrom's healthy, feel free to use him all you want. And the Royals are terrible. They have the worst WRC plus in all of baseball. They cannot hit, and they strike out all the time. So I just think this is a great opportunity to use DeGrom. I don't want to say he's a value. He's the most expensive player on this slate. But he should be like $11,000 tonight, and he's 9.9.
It makes me think now, too, if Garrett Cole was available against that Guardians lineup with the swing and miss rate, that was last year, could change. They've got mostly everyone back, but Cole's actually been good, not allowing the home run ball. It's 2 starts. I get it. And he hasn't pitched deep into games, 6+, I think twice. It's typically when he allows the home run. It's like the 7th or 8th inning when he goes deep into a game, but it hasn't burned him yet. I'd be curious as to where Cole would fit in this mix, because like you said, the matchups are what jump out for DeGrom, Kansas City, and for Ohtani, it's Washington. The Guardians are more respectable. You probably would have got a decent deal on Garrett Cole, is my point, if he was in this main 10-game slate.
Yeah, I mean, he tends to just be the highest priced pitcher on any slate he's on. You just have guys with a weird reputation like that, but you're right. I think he would have been more towards like the Nationals end of the spectrum, where just a good matchup, but not a great matchup because they don't strike out as much as you'd like. Now the Guardians sort of counteract that by also not hitting as many home runs as most teams. So they kind of can't take advantage of Cole's
home run rate. Yes. Yeah. Which is why Cole was good against them in the playoffs last year. Yeah,
exactly. But I will say, Cole's not the worst defender when it comes to this in baseball, but sometimes these power pitchers, these strikeout pitchers, are susceptible to the stolen base. And we even saw in yesterday's game between the Guardians and the Yankees, it didn't lead to a ton of offensive success. They only scored 3 runs, but the Guardians stole 4 bases in that game. It seems like they're going to just run whenever they get the opportunity against the Yankees in this series. So something to keep in mind on Wednesday and Thursday as this series continues.
Okay. That line was around, I'm just looking at Yankees Guardians. It's at minus 180 right now. The first 5 line is at minus 205. Okay, so that's edge to Cole and what he can do. How about in Toronto there? Alek Manoah is $7,700 against the Tigers.
Yeah, I wrote this up this morning. I don't get it. I'm someone who came into this season trying to temper people's expectations when it came to Alek Manoah. I mean, he's good. Don't get me wrong. And I love him. But the 2.24 ERA from last season, not exactly backed up by all of the advanced metrics. I think Manoah, people would think because he's such a big pitcher that he's like, a strikeout guy. He's a power pitcher. And to a certain extent he is, but his real key to success, he's almost like bigger Kyle Hendricks. Like, he's just done such a good job throughout his career of limiting opponent hard contact. People just can't seem to square him up, whether it's the way his fastball and his slider move and how he tunnels them,
Yep.
I'm not quite sure, but people have a really hard time squaring him up. And yes, he had a terrible start to the season on opening day against St. Louis, but he followed that up with 7 scoreless innings against the Royals. And yeah, I just crapped all over the Royals, but the Tigers, as you point out, not much better. They have the second worst WRC plus in baseball behind only the Tigers. And they're actually one of 2 teams in baseball who are striking out more often than the Tigers. So I don't know why Alek Manoah is less than 8K tonight. But don't ask questions. Just put him in your lineup and be happy. Corbin Burns is also a really interesting case. He's $8,500 tonight, which how often can you get Corbin Burns for less than 9K? Yeah, he's been terrible his first 2 starts of the season. I will fully admit that. And the strikeout numbers are low, which is concerning. If he was getting beat up, but the strikeouts were still there, I wouldn't even be second guessing this at all. The fact that the swinging strike rate hasn't quite been there is a little worrisome, but the Diamondbacks have not been hitting well. They've been winning games. They have not been hitting well so far this season. And actually, if you look at their lineup tonight, their normal 3 and 4 hitters, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. and Christian Walker, are not even in the lineup tonight. So this is like a really cushy matchup against the Diamondbacks team that does not have all its stars in the lineup tonight. So I think Corbin Burns at 8.5. If you want to maybe look, I love DeGrom. Like, I'm not saying fade DeGrom. I'm not saying fade Ohtani. But if you're just playing one lineup and you really want to differentiate yourself, knowing that so many people are going to start with at least one of DeGrom or Ohtani, if you want to go Burns Manoah, there's a lot of upside in that build too. And then you've got a lot more money to play around with to maybe get some of these expensive bats like a Mike Trout or a Mookie Betts into your lineup.
Yeah, and I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to hit on St. Louis and Colorado because it's Coors Field and this total. I saw this morning, and I'm like, wow, I get it. Like, if we're in July and you see a total, you're like, okay, that makes sense. I mean, it's April 11th. The season just started. The total for this game tonight, the first 5 totals at 6.5 runs.
Yeah,
6.5 first 5. So that means full game's what, like 13?
12, I think, 11 and
12,
a half.
12. It's a 12. Yeah. That's probably what? That's probably a public stack would be from that game.
Sure. But I will say, I think people are going to be maybe a little bit more hesitant to stack the Cardinals than they would under normal circumstances. And I just say that because the Cardinals have been struggling. They've lost, I believe, 7 of their last 8 games. Some of the big bats aren't hitting that well. They are pretty left-handed heavy, and they're going up against Kyle Freeland, who, if you're just someone who's like quick glance at some of these stats, Kyle Freeland hasn't allowed an earned run this season over 12 2/3 innings. However, if you start digging a little deeper, Kyle Freeland, generally speaking, is someone whose main mode of survival, particularly at Coors Field, he's an elite ground ball pitcher. His ground ball rate is way down from where it usually is through 2 starts. He's allowing way more fly balls than usual, and he is not getting any swings and misses. His swinging strike rate right now is 3.8%. That is microscopic. So when you're talking about a fly ball pitcher who's not missing bats, that is a death sentence at Coors Field. I would also say Miles Mikolas has been awful his first 2 starts of the season for the Cardinals. I think he's given up 19 base hits in like 9 innings. That's the reason you get a total of 12. It's just 2 pitchers who have just not really shown, even the ones who've pitched well, you're like, I can poke holes in this really quickly. So yeah, like, I think someone like Mike Moustakas is super cheap, and he's hitting 5th tonight for the Rockies. Like, Jordan Walker is still way too cheap. He's $2,900. Until he starts being priced up, you can almost use him any night, let alone nights where he's playing at Coors Field.
Nice.
There's a lot of cheap guys you can toss into a lineup if you like this game.
There you go. Walker, Moustakas, both sub 3K, like Garion said. Good stuff. All right, that's all the time we have. Thanks, Garion, for all of your insight. You can find Garion Thorne at dknation.draftkings.com for the latest on his NBA and MLB breakdowns. Thanks to Eamon and Matt behind the scenes. Enjoy the play-in basketball this evening, and good luck finding stats. I mean, just follow it along live, everybody, because in the minute that game ends, it's gone. It's gone, just like the pencil in in the dark night. Thanks to Gary and Thorne, Brendan Glasheen. You all have a great night. The Slate returns tomorrow.